All right, let's see what the cheapest modern current gen GPU can do, the RX6600 non-XT. And let's double check the settings. I'm pretty sure I've got it right. We're at 1080p. This is the RX6600. We're gonna start out at ultra quality settings. We're gonna go down through some lower settings, and I'll also probably try out some FSR. And if our frame rates are good enough, we'll probably even try some 1080p. It's 1440p. It's looking like at 1080p, at least not in combat. We are up around 100 frames per second. I'm getting shot in the back. Let me start actually paying attention to the combat a little bit so your gameplay you're viewing isn't too horrible. All right, I actually got some kills, guys. Why are they just like running that direction? I probably should have had some cover. All right, let's go ahead and drop down to the high settings. By the way, the rest of the system is very high-end. We've got a R9 5950X CPU running 32 gigabytes of 3600 RAM at CL16 timings. So in other words, this is a better system than you would normally put this GPU in. So this should be showing the limits of the GPU, not the CPU. Are these guys bots? Like, I'm killing them so much I'm just running out of ammo? I guess they're just running for the control zone. Well, let's go ahead and drop settings. They'll probably kill me while I do that, I don't care. Now, notice the textures drop down to medium when you go to the medium preset. I'm gonna leave them up at high because the only reason to turn down textures is if you're running out of VRAM. And you can see our GPU memory usage, VRAM utilization, is not up to 8 gigabytes. So we should be fine here. Look at our frame rates. We're up 140, 150. How does we do in combat? It drops a bit in combat, but we're still over like 120. So yeah, it looks like at medium settings, we are absolutely able to crush it on the 1080p with the 6600. I tested this game out on the GTX 1060 earlier today, so you can definitely see that a modern GPU, even the lowest end one, is giving us significantly better settings. Let's drop down to low and keep the textures up at high, see how that goes. Okay, now you can see that we're pushing up into the upper 100s, even hitting the 200 range, although it looked like in combat we dropped down to maybe 150-ish. All right. So it doesn't look to me like FSR is even slightly necessary here. But let's just say, okay, you want low, you want high textures, but basically we're gonna be trying to get the best performance we possibly can out of this thing. So let's even try FSR UltraQuality, just to push this as ridiculously far as we possibly can. Looks like we're pushing into the 200 and more, 250. Honestly, the FSR UltraQuality still looks pretty good here, even down at 1080p. I might not do this in a single player title at 1080p, but for a competitive multiplayer game, getting that extra little bit of performance is well worth the minor degradation in visuals, in my opinion. All right. Now let's actually check, what if we leave the FSR UltraQuality on, but we go to like, let's say we want to play on high settings, and let's make sure that the FSR stayed on. It did. Let's apply that. So if you want to play at high settings, but with FSR, looks like we can still be well over 100 frames per second, even in combat. Interesting. Okay, I switched it over to 1440p. Let's see how we do. Let's double check I've got all the settings right. So we are on 1440p. This is still the RX6600 non-XT. We're at Ultra preset, and double check FSR is not on. It is not. Okay, so, well, I mean, we're not in combat, but it's looking like 60 FPS. Over it here. Very interesting. Okay, I mean, we dropped slightly below 60 in the actual combat, But this is at ultra settings, 1440p. And this card is really marketed as a 1080p card rather than a 1440p card. So, very interesting. Certainly playable at 1440p, even here at ultra. But let's go ahead and drop it down to high settings, because I don't think at 1440p this card makes sense at ultra in a competitive game. You'll definitely want to turn things down. So here we are at the high settings. There I am exploding. Well, the explosion certainly dropped our frame rate. That's one thing I've noticed in this game, the death cams, especially when there's explosions, the frame rate drops, but it's not usually quite as bad when you're actually alive, although we're dropped into the 40s there with that explosion. So there's definitely some heavy-duty effects that can hit us. Sniper there. I do not like the recoil in this game. It just doesn't feel good. There's some games where the recoil feels fun to control. I'm just not really feeling that in this one. Oh well. Okay, let's go ahead and drop it down to medium. We're still seeing at high, we were still seeing some drops. I think we had enough VRAM space. We weren't going over, we were at about 7 GB usage, so I think we can keep the textures at high. Let's double check, we still got, yeah, FSR's still off. Don't want to accidentally kick anything on. Okay, we're over 100 FPS now. Below 100 in combat, but hey, this is looking pretty good. All right, we've got the zone. Let's kill the enemies. Ah, I'm getting shot, caught on something. All right, let's stay on the setting just a little bit longer because I want to get some little more close quarters combat maybe. Looks like we do drop into the 70s there when I was just shooting. It's hard to play the game and look at the frame rate counter, but I'm trying my best. Okay. Yeah, I think at these medium settings, this game is absolutely very, very playable, feels good at 1440p. Now, let's go ahead and test it out down at the low settings, although we'll keep the textures on high. And wow, yeah, frame rates are looking really good at low. Maybe test it just a second longer at low, and then we'll try out some FSR. Alright, got a few kills. Maybe I'm not as bad at CoD as I thought. It's definitely not great. Okay, let's leave it actually at the low settings with the textures on high. But now let's kick on FSR to UltraQuality. Honestly, this still looks really good. Much better than the game's internal resolution scaler. I've tried playing with that. And yeah, frame rates are looking very, very good here. 120, 130. Drops below 100 in combat, but stays pretty good. I can tell FSR is on. There's a little loss of detail, and the image looks a little bit extra sharpened with the cast filter, but I don't think it looks that much worse considering the frame rate bump that we get. Let's go ahead and actually leave the FSR on, but this time let's actually go up to medium quality, which I do think looked better than the low settings, but leaving the FSR on ultra quality. Yeah, very, very good frame rates. This little card is honestly pretty good, guys. Should I actually test this game out at 4K? I don't know, would that be a waste of time? I don't think it's a waste of time. I think it'd be stupid, stupid to play this at 4K on this card, but I think it might actually be possible. Let's test it out. Okay, so we're gonna try out 4K. And we are currently at the 4K Ultra settings, which does not make any sense at all on this GPU, but we're going to turn it down from there. There's the 4K, there's the RX6600, we are at Ultra, and there is no FSR on at the moment, but we are not going to stay here very long. Although, honestly guys, we're actually at 30 FPS here. Going up to 40 when there's not much going on the screen. Okay, I don't really want to play like this, but I'm honestly shocked that we're even around a somewhat playable 30 FPS. But let's immediately go down to high settings. Okay, high settings. And, you know, it's a little better. But still not great. So I don't think I want to stay on high settings very long. Let's go ahead and drop down to medium. Although, wait a minute, I think I want to keep the textures up if I can. Let's see what our VRAM utilization does. We're at 4K, so I have to be careful, but it's looking like VRAM is still staying at 7 gigabytes, not going up over 8, so I think we are good leaving the textures up. Okay, not in combat. Looks like we're actually at 60 FPS here, but in combat we're dropping into the 40s, although this feels pretty playable now. And again, we're not even using FSR yet. So definitely not really where I want to be for a competitive game, but I think it's kind of hilarious that this card's even playable at medium settings 4K. Alright, let's go ahead and drop down to low settings. Although we will keep the textures up. Yeah, just double checking that FSR didn't come on its own or anything. No, it didn't. Okay, low settings. Once again, we're in the 60s when we're not in combat. Dropping into the 40s and 50s, depending on what's going on screen. More character models and stuff is obviously harder. And this is surprisingly playable at 4K. Like, not at all competitive frame rates, but wow. Let's start kicking on some FSR and see what that does. So, first let's leave it down at low settings, and then kick FSR on to Ultra Quality. This looks fantastic on my 4K screen right now, by the way. Yeah, FSR Ultra Quality, even at the low settings with the textures up, I honestly think this looks very good. And are we actually staying over 60 FPS in combat? No way. I think we're doing surprisingly well. Let's go down to the more aggressive FSR settings. So let's go down to the quality setting. We're over 90 FPS, 80s and 90s. Let's see what happens in combat. Okay, well, I died, but the frame rate stayed over 60. Let's get in some actual firefights here. Man, we are staying at pretty good frame rates here. Guys, the RX6600 non-XT, the cheapest the cheapest current GPU out right now, is playing this game at high refresh rate 4K, as long as you're willing to use FSR at the quality setting. And honestly, this looks way better than native 1440p did on my actual screen in person. Like, I'm honestly blown away by the performance right now. This is kind of crazy. Okay, let's go ahead and use some even more aggressive FSR all the way down to balanced, which I wouldn't do in a single player game. Yeah, I can definitely see it more now. So this is definitely degrading the image quality, but still looks fairly good. And for a competitive game, you know, frames win games. And honestly, are we staying over 100 FPS? Was that over 100 even in combat? It was hard for me to see it. Okay, so it will drop into the 80s a bit there in combat. But honestly, guys, I think this is kind of insane. Let's go ahead and actually turn the settings up to medium, because I think we're actually going to be pretty good. We'll leave the textures up at high. And you know what? Let's even actually do the FSR just down to quality. So quality FSR, medium settings at 4K, with the textures all the way up. And we are staying well above 60 FPS. Looks like even in combat, I needed to reload, couldn't get the kill. Okay, I don't want this video to drag on, but I've got to say, I am just blown away by the performance of the 6600 in this game. I mean, even at 4K. And at 1080p and 1440p, you can get some crazy high refresh rates.